Hey folks, Chris here, and we've got a special interview we're going to do today. We're going to talk to two of the writers of this book, Alliance's Orphans, which is currently kickstarting a crowdfund campaign through Dynamite and Kickstarter so that you can get a copy of this. Ideas from Stan Lee. We've got an intro and a cover by the great Bill Sienkiewicz. Szymon Kudranski, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, doing most of the interiors here. But we've got Mr. Ryan Silbert and Mr. Luke Lieberman. Thank you both so much for giving me some of your time today. I know you guys are definitely busy, but yeah, I'm happy to do it. Now, I fortunately have actually already picked up a copy of the book. I got to meet you briefly, Ryan. It was during New York Comic Con weekend, and you kindly signed my copy, so I appreciate that. But let's catch the viewers up to speed. I've got questions for each of you about sort of the creative process and everything. But Luke, maybe I could start with you if you could just give us like sort of a high level overview of like what kind of a book is this? Like what's the story here?
So this is part of A Trick of Light, which came out through Audible, was Stan's last work, and it came out in 2019, and it has his audio introduction, and it was performed by Yara Shahidi. So this is sort of in that world. We had a follow-up with Will Wheaton called New Reality. That was an Audible original, and then this is the third work in the world. But you don't actually have to read those previous works because this is intended as a jumping on point. But the opening 14 or 15 pages that Bill Sienkiewicz did the art to is the sort of, it's really the first story we wrote in this creative universe. It's the sort of the initial scene that was conceived with Stan. And the idea involves an inventor who, the Hive is this sort of evil alien species that is dominating this sector of the galaxy. And when they take over a planet, they kill all the intelligent life forms, but they keep one. And that's the sort of lone survivor is what an orphan is. You're literally the last of your species, and they keep you as this kind of genetic artifact so that they can study you and take from you what they like. And with the inventor, who is the main character in this prologue, his planet's wiped out, his daughter's killed, and he is a genius though, and they recognize that's part of the reason they keep him alive. So the Hive puts him to work building their technology so that they can, continue their campaign. And he sort of pretends to follow along. He builds them a lot of inventions along the way, but his greatest invention is actually kind of a backdoor to taking them out. It's his revenge, and it's this alien AI called Nia that he crafts sort of he crafts after his daughter. He wants to remember his daughter, so he creates an alien AI called Nia, and he convinces the Hive that to truly rule, they need to merge with this AI, and the moment that they do, he turns it against them. And then he pieces out, takes his alien AI. In the rest of the storyline, we find out, like A Trick of Light, you find out he's been hiding out on Earth with it, which is kind of our way into that. But the other orphans that were on the ship with him, who were his sort of compatriots and found family, he sort of leaves them, and this is where the rest of the book goes, to clean up his mess, because he's created all of these immensely powerful tools, weapons for the Hive over time. And now that the Hive is gone, there's a power vacuum in the galaxy, and there's this sort of mad scramble to get your hands on these things before the other factions do, so that you can assume power and, fill the vacuum. And that's basically what the rest of the book is about, is them fixing one big malfunctioning invention that the inventor left behind, and trying to gather his other, the other things he's left scattered throughout the galaxy. And that's sort of, they're sort of scavengers in that sense. And that's kind of, we meet them mid-journey when we pick
I
up
appreciate you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you at the end there. So we've got the plot, and it's like, seems like, sci-fi soap opera type stuff. Not soap opera, space opera is what I meant to say. Two different
I'll go
things.
with that.
Ryan, co-writer here, like anything you think Luke left out, or could you tell us sort of what tone you guys were going for when you crafted this story?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is in developing this universe with Stan over many years, and the way it kind of came together was it was really like a Dungeons and Dragons with Stan serving as dungeon master over multiple years of creating characters and storylines. So a lot of the curiosities you see, I think, are really interesting because the reflection, it really reflects where we are today. And of course, this was developed years ago, and it really shows what a creative like mind Stan had when in terms of tapping into humanity and like where we could go and the prospects of what things could be. And one of those things is artificial intelligence. And, you know, this was not done in the world of where we live today. I mean, this was created years ago. And he had a way of just peering around the corner. And, you know, it makes me think, and I know this isn't the channel for it, but like historically, when he and Kirby developed Fantastic Four, and that was a big kind of touchstone for the three of us as we worked together, is the idea that we hadn't been to the moon yet, and here we are rendering the moon from space, you know, as an imagination, and that's really a lot of what we're dealing with in terms of identity, how artificial intelligence can control, how it can shape the world, how inventions, and to Luke's point, some of these are weapons, but some of them are not intended to be weapons. They're sometimes intended to be a utopian version of the world. And it goes wrong because once you invent something, you really can't control how users use it or how people take it on themselves. And that's what we're seeing a lot of nowadays. So, I mean, this is why this is a fun Alliance is a fun universe, and it's in our mind, the way we've created Orphans specifically is it goes back to the journey into mystery throwbacks. You know, there is a homage, nostalgic feel to it. Part of it is because it was written by Stan. The other part of it is because we felt like Luke and I that this was not a well explored territory in Stan's repertoire. We've seen the superheroes. We haven't really, you know, we got to speak to him often about what it was like pre, you know, Marvel Age. And that's I think stuff that I think is overlooked. The guy had been working for 40 years, well, 30 years before, you know.
Who's counting?
Who's counting at this point? But like, you know, it's a remarkable achievement, you know, in terms of the breadth of which he was working. And then, you know, to invite us in and for Luke and Stan to invite me in, you know, it was just a gift from my perspective. And we're so excited that audiences can experience this in two different versions on the Kickstarter, because in the Kickstarter, we're offering Trader's Revenge, which is a uniquely a kind of a Titans come together for the first time, which is Bill and Stan. Never worked together before outside of Stan's publishing
the first
at Marvel.
Few pages here.
Yeah, and that's uniquely only available on the Kickstarter.
Just a tease.
Yeah. And we always wanted to do that as a comic, you know, but this was our way sort of to do it as a graphic novel, to tell the whole story, but also to now spin it off into its own piece. So I don't know, from my perspective, it's very exciting.
Got briefly interrupted by internet stuff. But I'd read that you, like, I don't know any further details, Luke. It said that you had, like, worked with Stan before this. Like, what was that relationship? Can you help?
Can I give you a fun story? So the Stan's documentary just came out on Disney Plus, and in the opening montage, they licensed 2 audio clips from me. It's the bit where he's talking about how we're all summation of everything we've experienced, seen, read, and heard, and a different piece about perseverance. And they're both in the opening 2 minutes of the documentary. And I shot that of him the day I met him when I was an NYU film student. And it's still kind of like, and that was in 2000. So it was, 23 years ago. And it just, like, when they licensed, they didn't tell me exactly how they were going to use it. Some kid called me and asked me if he could use it. There we go. And then I saw it in there, and it just sort of hit me like, what would Stan have thought when he sat down with these, like, it was me and a couple of my friends, like these film students, sitting him down, asking him these questions, if someone told him that that would be the opening to his Disney Plus documentary in 20 some odd years? Like, I don't think that probably would have kind of, maybe I would have gotten a different answer. So I was very happy with the answer. And Ryan knows about this project because it's still so instructive. Like, there's stuff he said back then that stuck with me for years. That line in the documentary about perseverance and how if you have something, you think you really got it, you got to stick with it. I mean, I just made the Red Sonja movie. It was 17 years in development. So that stuff really stuck with
Congrats.
me, So in terms of my process, he gave me my first job when I came out of film school after NYU. I just sort of stayed, and then I worked for him a little bit before I went off to launch Red Sonja. But he was a friend, and he was also a family friend, and so once I had gone through the process, grown up a little bit, I kind of circled back to him, and I would just sort of schedule times to hang out because it's Stan, and I took the onus of making sure that the relation, I wanted the relationship. So I would call his assistant and say, when is he free? And I would just go over and hang out when he had a minute. And eventually, we'd have our conversations. And there was a day where we started talking about the internet in particular, and how, when I first met him, he was really like, he thought the internet was going to be this amazing technology that connected everyone and allowed us to share ideas, and it was going to break down tribal barriers and bring us all together and allow us to understand each other. And then flash forward, and he was quite disappointed with how that technology was ultimately used to misinform and put us in our bubbles and tribalize us and set us against each other. And it sort of had the opposite, and that technology is kind of like we were talking about with the inventor, right? He just creates stuff because it's possible, and they have a dream of what's possible. And then there's the reality that comes afterwards about how humans come and screw it up. And that's basically what happened with the internet. And then from that conversation, we started to needle the idea of the inventor. And when I walked out, I just realized that we had come up with something that he liked. And I always wanted to make something with Stan. So I, went home and started trying to develop it and bring it back to him. It's okay, remember this? Like, what do you think? And then he'd give me some more ideas, and we would go back and forth. And his time was a premium. And so ultimately, I realized that I needed a sort of brainstorming partner for when, like, I would have a session with Stan. He would give me some thoughts and stuff to further develop. And I needed someone who I could, so that every time I was coming back to him, I was coming back to him with some creative value, like some time invested, something cool, so that he didn't feel like he was wasting time. He was older in life. Stan did not like to waste time. His attention span is actually pretty quick. So you need to keep him engaged. And Ryan and I were Comic-Con friends. And
I was going to ask about all this.
Well, I mean, we can go. I mean, actually, he went to high school with my wife. So when I started bringing my wife to Comic-Con, she wanted to hang out with her friend Ryan. And that's how I met.
Didn't want to hang out with me in high school, but Comic-Con.
But
yeah.
So you guys have known each other for quite a while.
Yeah.
We met probably 10 years before we started on the journey, or maybe like less than that.
Maybe like 7 or 8. Yeah. Yeah. And it was late one night. It was after the parties. We had been drinking. We were sort of stumbling to dive bar to get some crappy food. And I looked at him and I said, "Look, I've been working on this with Stan. I need a partner. Do you want to come in?" And then that's when when we sobered up, that's when I introduced him to, I think he'd met Stan before, but that's when I introduced him as a creative partner to Stan. That's when we all started working together to further develop it. And we very deliberately did not want to have, because look, I live in LA.
You're breaking up now, Luke.
Yeah. I think it's on.
Can you hear me now?
Right now. We can always hear you. It's just that you're sort of stuttering a little bit.
That's okay.
The resolution on your camera dropped a tiny bit.
I'll be the man of mystery. where was I going with this? I don't know. Where
You're talking about drinking with Ryan. I don't know, Ryan. You remember anything from here?
No, none of this is. This is the last 10 years have been a blur of creativity and chicken wings.
Yeah,
But you know, look, the fact is, like, you know, this is one of those things where I think Luke was very smart, not because he invited me, but because one of the things that, you know, Luke and Stan had in their minds was to build out a bullpen of characters, of people to work with on these characters, which is why we developed the characters, the storylines, then we wrote, you know, and then what would happen is we would ideate, but we always knew we wanted to have collaborators that could lift things to be at their highest level. And that's where people like Bill and Will and you know, Yara, they come in and like, or like companies like Dynamite or Audible, who just care so much about what they're creating and putting out in the world. So they take care with our stuff. And I don't know, like I just say stuff, but like that's what we have. We have, you know, material now. We're on our fourth or third, you know, depending how you count, project. And all of our partners are people we love to work with, and bring things that we could never bring to the table. And that's something I think that Stan was, beyond being a creative genius, he was a genius at that, for sure. And that's, you know, I think goes under recognized.
Fair.
So, but yeah, that's us. Luke,
what
you're
about,
back.
as long as
I'm
you're
back.
speaking about like talent and stuff and people whose time is at a premium, certainly Bill Sienkiewicz is at that level at this point. Like, was it one of you? Was it Dynamite? Like, who was it? Stan? Like, who reached out to Bill?
Nick reached out to Bill.
That makes sense.
Brucey at Dynamite.
Sure. President of
But
Dynamite.
he was,
I remember.
but he was really
Yeah,
the
go
only
ahead.
person on our. He was really the only person on our list to do that piece, because we knew that that was precious material, because we had actually, you know, that was something that Stan actually wrote. So we had to be working with somebody at Bill's, not only style, but Bill's care. And,
Yeah.
you know, Bill cares so much. I mean, so much. I didn't even realize, as a fan, I knew, but like never until you work with him. Like every single stroke is intentional.
Oh yeah.
And if it's not
Yeah.
right, he lets you know. Like,
Well, I'll have
you know,
a
you'll
small
wait.
example there. Like
I get something amazing.
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
You know, Bill Sienkiewicz, guy I'm a big fan of. And so anytime I've been to a Comic-Con and he's there, I want to swing by and see what he's working on. And I remember one time somebody had just paid him for a commission to draw over $1 bill, and simple enough. And Bill works in mixed media. He's got all sorts of different pens and paints and stuff. And he is, you know, like working, and he's making this really interesting piece of artwork, and he starts like using some whiteout and stuff. And then he ultimately like covers up the whole thing that he had drawn and just keeps working and layered something completely new on top of it. And I was like, oh, I guess like I thought like what he was creating had been perfect and he was going to accent it, but no, like he just like his vision changed while he did it, and it had to be perfect. And he just completely whited over this beautiful painting, and then just like came up with a whole new one. It was fascinating to watch.
It's unbelievable. And, you know, this is part of where you find a trusted team.
Go
you
ahead.
get somebody like Nick at Dynamite, whose, you know, relationships with creators is so genuine that of course they're going to want to work with him and on books that he puts out. And like, that's part of my experience now as a comic creator, because I mean, this was just a dream and something that I love, not something that I thought I was going to do. But like, you know, Luke has had a long relationship with Nick, and I say long because why? Of course it's going to be long, because Nick is, you know, a fan and an incredible business person, and, you know, does so much for our industry. So like, you know, that's how you get somebody like Bill, you know,
Yeah,
his time.
I remember,
obviously, like Red Sonja's been on a nice creative streak for a long time. If people aren't familiar, Luke runs Red Sonja LLC, and Dynamite publishes it. So just to explain that little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when I was initially
50 years.
looking for, am I breaking up again? When I was initially looking around at publishers, especially at that time, publishers were all trying to just a lot of them were just making a book not really sell the book or for fans. They were making it so that they would have something that they could go take to a studio and try to get it made into a movie. And like the whole sort of the end game of their creative was, I'm going to just make this. My business is not comics. My business is IP development for studios, right? And Nick is different in that comic books are in his bones. Like he's been doing it since he was born practically. Yeah, he's been in the industry since he was born, and people don't know, but when he was a little kid, he used to go to conventions and get people to sign things, and then he would resell what he got the artists and the writers to sign, when he was little, when he was like 12. So it's really his world, and I love that about it. That's why I wanted to make, because I wanted to tell stories. Like, I'm not just making a comic book so that I can go, 10 people read it and you can go hand it to an executive. I mean, that's I don't know. That's not the purpose.
That's fair.
Tell stories, and if you build it, they will come. And if you keep telling good stories, eventually people will recognize. I mean, that's the point.
Yeah. So when you guys were approaching like writing Alliance's Orphans, was there anything that you had in mind where you were like, let's do this because this is a comic book as compared to, thinking about future adaptations?
I mean, I honestly, that was part of the real hunt. We didn't really start full throttle on this project until we got Bill, because we needed the right artist for it to make sense for this medium. And Szymon, Kudranski, the other artist, was brilliant too. And it's like when we landed our art team, that's when we knew it was time to really move forward in this medium. Because they were the ones that were going to realize it. You remember the first two works in this were started out as audio works, and they were Audible originals. So there you're sort of looking at the reader, the person reading it, but the artwork, there was no imagery. So we were sort of, they had to imagine the story, and now you're bringing it from that medium into this medium, which made a lot of sense because it's, Stan was involved. But in order for it to really work in this medium, you had to find the right artists, and that's when we,
And this is where, like, for us, like, I mean, we're comic fans, so this was intentionally made as a comic. But you look at, we also are, and thanks to what you do, Chris, it's like, comic history is such an important part of it, and something Nick understands, something Stan certainly was part of. So like, the idea of going from audio to comics is built into the coding of comic books. They came out of radio serials, and that was a lot of what that Stan material. So it really, for us, bringing Alliances this way and introducing it to fans this way feels very natural in terms of the progression of how
that's
to do
interesting.
this the right way.
There's a tremendous amount of world building behind this. A lot of characters, a lot of things that are like hinted or touched on, but you realize that there are bigger forces out in this world that are like still to be explored. So what steps did you guys take to like sort of like, like focus on the titular orphans in this and like, make them like real people? Like what steps did you take to like sort of, were those creative discussions? Did you like hand things back and forth? Like how did that get developed?
It was important for us that people could pick this up and read it without having a PhD in Alliances. Like, this needed to be a jumping on point for people. We obviously would love people to go read the first two projects, but it's not necessary. We wanted this to, especially because you're launching in a whole new medium, right? So this is, you went from audio to comics. It's a shift. So you want this to be something someone can just pick up without having read anything else in the series and love for what it is. And I think the story's pretty, contained, but part of the reason that the world building, like, it's easier to write a big story like this when you have all the development, the world building development is done. And, we had such that was the benefit of the long process. There we go. Ryan.
I don't know where
Ryan and I did with Stan.
I think Luke froze.
The hive is coming to get you.
Am I back?
Yeah,
back.
you're sort of
Yes.
coming back.
Okay.
It's stuttering every once in a while, Luke. But I think it's like Ryan says. The AI is hearing you talk about it, and it wants you to only say nice things.
Nia is here.
Yeah.
I was saying the benefit of having all the world building that we had done over the years with Stan is that when it comes time to write a big story like this, like it's already like the foundations and the universe itself is already built out. So you're not sort of making it all up as you go along. It is a very big story to try to make up as you go along. You needed the background work. You needed to come into this with that already developed, so that you could then just tell a story that felt grounded inside of a universe that exists, not inside of a universe that we're just sort of where all the rules are sort of unsure and things like that.
Yeah, I think for us too, it's
go ahead.
also keeping it in that sort of 60s style, and like Mobius was a big inspiration, which is why Sleeman came in, because that was for a lot of people a jumping on point was, what was then just the Silver Surfer issue series, but is now known Parable. Like that was a big touchstone because we wanted to keep it in that like 60s serial style in this particular instance for the bulk of the book.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
One interesting thing, as long as we're talking about sort of like the format, is, we've got the full, story here. What was there ever any discussion of doing this as like, say, like a monthly series or anything like that? Or did you guys always want to tell the full story all at once?
We're pretty sort of agnostic. I think that was really Nick as the publisher saying, this is the sort of highest form of the medium is the original graphic novel. And this is the sort of best version and the best way to tell the story. And, look, one of the things that I know is that I don't know everything. So I listen to people who know more about their subject matter than I do. And I listen to my publisher when it comes to publishing books.
And obviously, like, we're talking about this because there's the Kickstarter going on, and it's already successfully funded. So I think, this is just worth telling people that, hey, if you want to get this comic, this is a nice way to get it. And you can also get that ash can that you're talking about, that like with the prologue chapter. If this does well enough, is this something that you guys do have more stories in you that you'd like to tell, or is this like it for now?
No, as we mentioned, like we have, almost a decade of material that we've worked on. So we certainly have plenty to explore. And, one of the things that I think is of value here is that, we are introducing, and you kind of alluded to it, there are things that are not fully explored in depth in this particular graphic novel, but it is certainly Trader's Revenge and Orphans, introduces, I would say, a half a dozen new characters that we are, already exploring. And that's one of the exciting things for us. And we hope, fans, with the Kickstarter, can jump in, because this is, in my opinion, this is a great jumping on point to discover and be at the sort of ground floor for this group of orphans, the inventor, Nia, who's already part of the New York Times bestselling Trick of Light, that kind of thing. So for if I was a fan, that's what I always loved when I was growing up, was
we got plans
floor.
We got plans for the orphans. We got plans for the orphans.
Yeah.
We've got, and I mean, we might as well talk about some of them, since we talked about the inventor.
When you've got all these writers. Oh, go ahead.
No. I was just gonna look. I'm in love with the characters.
Yeah.
So I mean, Little Boy is kind of my favorite because he's a 9 foot tall little boy who's also kind of a genius. But he, so he's, but he's got
stand out. He did stand out.
He's got the kind of emotional maturity of a 5-year-old. So he wants to be a leader, and he's precocious and highly intelligent. He's big and strong, in his way, but he's still a kid. Like he lacks the maturity. And then Hayes.
Well, the whole crew is definitely flawed.
Yeah. Well,
and I found it interesting because of their flaws. I sincerely did. I was like, oh, the orphans are, a bit of that ragtag group of outsiders that I think a lot of people can latch onto at least one, if not more.
Yeah.
The characters, they may be aliens and stuff, but to me, I was like, oh yeah, these feel like real people. So I did like that aspect quite a bit. I'll
You know, we
just
have
say
we
that was
announced
one of the pieces that I liked quite a bit.
and we announced to our Comic-Con panel in November some of like our next kind of preview of releases that are coming. So
Ryan, let him keep talking about all the things he liked about our story. Keep
okay.
No, that was it.
Hear it.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just giving you a hard time. I wanted to continue. It's interesting. It's an interesting world. I liked the Orphans quite a bit as characters. And there's just an interesting aspect to sort of a legacy that Stan Lee left behind, aside from all the Marvel characters that we already know. So it's always that's always an interesting aspect to sort of try to understand this guy. I mean, he's so bombastic and larger than life, but he's sort of an enigma. It's like, exactly what does Stan bring to the table? Well, the only way to know, I guess, is by reading all the different stuff he did and try to like find that kernel of truth in the middle.
What I would say is that by the time we were working with him, in addition to just being, he's probably the most spontaneously creative person I ever met. Like he's always got ideas coming out, and not everyone's a diamond, and he'll be the first to tell you, but they just keep coming. And some of that is actually a great part of his process, in that he never gets married to anything in particular. Like he can just, you know what, this doesn't work. We'll throw it out. There's more where that came from. Here we go. But the other thing, by the time we were working with him, he was literally probably the most experienced storyteller in the world. So he could see down, it's like you bring him some development and he could just kind of like game it out. Like he knew whether something was going to work 5 steps down the chessboard, like by the time you were 2 sentences in. And then he would know kind of how to make it. Well, like he had heard, been part of so much storytelling over so many years that there was just this kind of wisdom to his process at that point that, there's no, I've never seen, like I've worked with a lot of creative people and I've just never seen anything quite like that, and that was an aspect that came, I think, when, and I'm sure he had some version of that earlier, but that's, our experience of him was this, it's Gandalf, sitting there as your dungeon master.
What about the actual writing process? Like, is there anything you can share in terms of like, did you guys have any sort of schedules? Did like one person write it and another person rewrite it? Like, what was the process itself, or was it like just conversations, like in person or over Skype? Like, what was it?
It sort of depends on the project. I mean, there was, because let's separate 2 things. There's the sort of scripting, and then there's the creative development. And creative development you're not really writing out every scene with dialogue and things like that. I mean, maybe you'll have some idea for a line of dialogue and you put it in just so you remember it when you go write the scene. But like, and so for most of the years that we were working with Stan, it was creative development, not so much scripting. The Traitor's Revenge story, because it's the first thing that we did, Stan was involved in some of the scripting of, and A Trick of Light, in particular, because that was the first novel that we did while, we finished that manuscript while Stan was still with us, that he was involved in the scripting of. In terms of Orphans, the book that you're looking at now, the scripting of the prologue, Traitor's Revenge, Stan was involved in. The scripting of the rest of the book that we did with Sleeman, the creative development was done with Stan, and then the scripting was done with Ryan, by Ryan and I. And in terms of our process,
that's what I'm curious about.
Honestly, one of us would write a few pages. We would literally kind of split up scenes. You write this one, I'll write the next one, and then you trade them, and then you rewrite each other's stuff, and then you get upset because you changed something the other guy liked, and whatever. That's the creative.
I never was upset. Well, I'll say this: one of the cool things was being able to deliver the scripted work of Traitor's Revenge to Bill, and for Bill to really, because Stan wasn't with us any longer, for Bill to tap into those pages and what we had done many years prior, is, it was very complimentary to us from Bill, but it was really to Stan, which was like, he's like, it felt like collaborating with him, with the scripting.
Wow.
And that was
It's interesting.
something, I was very happy about, but like also of course Stan would have been happy about too, but also it shows like what a cool medium comics are compared to any other medium, where like the way that the artist and the writer work can be separated by such a far distance, but they can still commune. I don't know.
Especially today. Yeah.
It's unlike anything else. Yeah. I mean, our whole book was made by international collaborators from Poland to, Latin America and Europe. I mean, we were all over the place.
A Trick of Light, I think, was in, I don't know how many languages. A lot. It was in a lot of languages, but it was also, and it was recorded by Audible with a different reader in each territory. So, we had German, we had Palm from Guardians of the Galaxy reading in French.
Oh, in French, okay.
Yeah, I just finished my Duolingo in French. I still don't really understand what's happening, but I was able to finally listen to Palm's performance, and I'd never heard her. I'd seen the recording, but I'd never really been able to understand it. And she's what an extraordinary actress she is.
I just realized that like not every viewer necessarily knows. We're talking about Pom Klementieff, the actress who plays Mantis in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
I just realized I was taking that for granted, but like just to be clear for everybody, that's amazing. That really is.
Yeah.
What a funny
and that's
crossover.
One of the things that I think, but for Stan's work also, and it's important for Luke and I too. One of the things that was important in developing the project itself was we wanted this to be an internationally scoped project. Not commercial, not for commercial reasons, but for creative ones. That we really, for Stan, our perspective on the world is that the world is blended and it is supposed to, engage and work in a way that boundaries shouldn't exist in that kind of manner. And with all of our projects, we've been very fortunate to creatively be able to work internationally, but also be able to reach international audiences and root projects in international spaces. So that's the future of alliances is international for sure.
Well, I definitely want folks to check this out. So like what I'll do is the link to the Kickstarter is in the description, but what about like what you guys have coming up? I mean, you each have like all sorts of comics behind you and stuff. Like, do you each want to take a minute to just let us know what kind of stuff you're working on?
I got to talk about my panel. When is this coming out? Because I think we're going to do the official panel announcement. I'm doing a 50th anniversary panel for Red Sonja at Comic-Con.
This will be out no later than July 8th.
Okay, it'll probably, I don't know if I'm stepping on anyone's announcement. I don't care. I'm doing a 50th. It's up on the Comic-Con website now, so people can figure it out. I'm doing a 50th anniversary panel on Friday the 21st in room 5AB from 11 a.m. to 12:30 a.m. We're going to have Jimmy Palmiotti, Amy Chu, Amanda Connor, Dan Panosian, Mark Canton is a producer on the film, and I'm moderating. We're going to show an exclusive, some exclusive footage from the film. We're going to talk about the history of the character. So that's actually awesome. What I'm kind of jamming on between now and Comic-Con is just getting the panel, getting the panel together.
I don't know where I put it, but somewhere here I've got Red Sonja #1 with the art with the cover, Frank Thorne stuff. So
yeah. So, I mean, I'm right before I spoke to you. I'm like literally myself editing together a video piece to go at the beginning of the panel, and then I'll probably throw it up on YouTube or whatever. It's, we have Roy, Roy sent in a video, Gail sent in a video.
That's nice.
I'm putting it together. I mean, and the old artwork Frank's artwork is so cool. And there's actually this old recording. I'm trying to make sure there's this old record. Hold on a minute. I had it.
Okay.
There's a record.
I want to know what's on the other side of Luke's screen that he pulls things from. It's amazing.
It's endless void things.
Yeah, I know, and I'm sorry I'm not really prepared for this. Oh, wait, here it is. There's the Harkanian record that was like made in 1976 or something. Is that the copy? Yeah, 1976.
Oh my gosh! That's an obscure piece of ephemera.
But it's got that whole also Prince in the self same days that Conan did, and I think it's Frank Thorne reading it. but I can't authenticate that. And I've been trying to, because I want to, like, somebody cool is reading it. It's a cool audio piece, and I'm using it because
somebody knows.
Apparently my company does own the copyright to this, so I'm going to use it. But I don't know if it was Frank or the guy singing the song. So I'm trying to figure that out. I literally just emailed Roy and asked him if he could tell me.
Okay.
Because I figured he would.
Good luck. That's a really cool little piece for like Red Sonja fans. That's a deep pull, obviously. That's really cool. The panel sounds good.
Yeah.
Anything you got comics wise, Ryan? I know you have your finger in many entertainment areas, but like any comic stuff coming up?
My comic stuff I do with Luke, so we're not quite ready to announce it yet, but we're on the other
That's
once we're
fair.
on the other side of once we reach the Trader's Revenge goal, we have a lot to announce. We have a lot to talk about.
Okay.
Hopefully New York Comic Con. But
yeah, that's not too far away at
right,
this point. Yeah, I'll be there.
Right now, I'm just here to read and study up.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Guys, thank you so much for giving me some of your time. I know you guys are busy, and we sort of to coordinate 3 people is exponentially harder than 2. So I really appreciate that you carved out some time to do this. I hope a lot of my viewers will consider taking a look at your Alliance's Kickstarter and follow up after that as well. Continued success with these projects. You've got a unique working relationship here but it seems to be successful. It seems to be a really positive thing. You guys seem to vibe on the same stuff there.
Thank you, man.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
All right. Well, good luck at San Diego Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con, every Comic-Con. And until next time, I just guess I'll tell my viewers to keep reading comics.